So, good morning, good afternoon, Shabbat Shalom from Fancy Flatbush. Just got back from Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and I really thought this part would be a little bit different. Usually, Parsha A, one of my favorite kliyakars, my top two, top three, is about meat, eating meat. Yarchiv Hashem Gevolcha, and the famous kliyakar that we should treat meat like you have to trap for it, even though all of us don't do any of that. We don't go we don't go hunting. I don't think so. We don't do that stuff. There's actually a Noda B'Yehuda talks about that. It's not Tzar B'Alachayim, but why would a Jew do that? Hunt. If someone asked the Noda B'Yehuda about hunting, he says, no, it's not Tzar B'Alachayim, but I don't see how a Jew hunts, as far as just not our teva. Be that as it may, Kliyakar here and also in Bereshis talks about that when Yitzchak sends Esav to now hunt, hunt what? They had meat right in the backyard, I'm sure. Why do you have to hunt for the meat? And the point is, a person should not get into the habit of eating meat all the time. Not a good thing. Forget about the fact that it's achzarius perhaps to eat meat all the time, like a Ramban, for example, would say. But Kliyakar says, listen, if you get into the habit of eating meat all the time and it's expensive, then you'll come to either steal, you come to either cut corners in business, because you have this habit to eat expensive food all the time. So first of all, don't get the habit of eating meat all the time. You treat it as you have to hunt for it, just like it's a tercha to go to the woods and put traps out and go hunt. And it's dangerous too, to go hunt for animals, wild animals at least, it's dangerous. A person should kind of have that approach, even if the food is in their freezer and the hot dogs or a steak is pretty close by. But treat it like you have to trap for it. It was like a tircha, and you shouldn't get into the habit. Okay, famous kliyakar. What's interesting though is I was in Wyoming, and they have these self-guided audio tours. It's $15. You download the app and the audio, so you can go around the Tetons, go around Yellowstone, and you could literally hear as you go 5 miles, and it tells you where you are, where you're going. And we got to this area in this lake in Yellowstone, and talking about trout. Trout, kosher, this week's parsha, all the kosher animals, the fish, the birds, and he's going on and on about the cutthroat trout, which I never heard of in my life, perch, rainbow, and he was saying how it's so important that what they're doing now is they're trying to get rid of the other trout from the river. The other trout, the rainbow and the perch, all the different type of trout are damaging, or they're overtaking the cutthroat trout. And I'm thinking, who the heck cares? Fish is fish, trout is trout. Let's not go crazy here. And the guy went on and said how cutthroat trout is very important because the eggs that it lays the eggs closer to the shore. And then the other animals, the bears, elk, bison, they eat. The wolves, they go to the edge of the lake and they eat. And they survive and they do well because the cutthroat trout is doing well. So because somebody, maybe 50, 60 years ago, thought it'd be a good idea to introduce other types of trout into these lakes by Yellowstone. No one knew this 50, 60, 70 years ago that this was an issue. But the other trout is eating the food of the cutthroat trout. And because the other trout doesn't lay its eggs towards the shore, it only lays the eggs in the water, the bears can't get to it, and all the animals are not starving, but they're suffering because the cutthroat trout is being overtaken in these lakes. So there's a whole movement, I can't make this up, there's a whole movement to kind of take other trout out of the lakes Yellowstone, put them somewhere else, and let the cutthroat trout thrive, repopulate, regenerate, all this stuff. And I'm thinking, it's so interesting, because a few minutes before, they talked about taking wolves out of Yellowstone. There was a movement to get rid of killing the elk and the moose in Yellowstone. So they took the wolves out years ago. Problem was now it's overcrowded of these elk and wolves, and they didn't have any food, and it was messing up the ecosystem for them. So they have to reintroduce the wolves. So this way, again, ecosystem has to take place. The wolves get to kill and they get to eat some of the elk, and now the bears can get their food back. So the whole system really is so interesting. So I thought it was so interesting how, we look at a parsha, we look at these animals, and you kind of think, we had these animals months ago in Shmini. Who really cares about this? Is it so important? Your kids in the summer always complaining, why did God create these mosquitoes? And then last week, some kid in Jackson at Shabbos at the Chabad, some kid complained that he got stung by a bee. Everyone complains about bugs and all these things. And literally, I thought it was interesting that the Torah goes out of its way to mention this twice: kosher animals, kosher birds, and it lists all these birds, lists all these animals that we'll never eat. They're not kosher. We're not going to ever have any issue for them. But I thought it was interesting the fact that every bird, every bug is important, whether it's kosher or not kosher, but it's mentioned in the Torah, it's created by Hashem. I thought it was interesting to kind of call this out and have an appreciation for the fly. Flies, well, other things eat the flies, and then those things are eaten by things that comes to us. So that's kind of a thought, a little interesting intake as far as my trip and some of the lessons I guess I got from Yellowstone. Shabbat Shalom.